The United States government is killing thousands of cormorants on the Columbia River off the coast of Washington State and Oregon. Cormorants are a native species of marine bird, and Shark was on the river in our boat, the Bob and Nancy, for 3 weeks documenting the killing. We recorded groundbreaking video that exposed the slaughter by a secretive government agency called Wildlife Services. You can see more of the cruelty we filmed on this link. Wildlife Services is responsible for the brutal deaths of millions of wild animals every year across our country. Secrecy is crucial to their operations, and they very much fear the public witnessing what they do. That's why when Shark first arrived on the Columbia River, Wildlife Services stopped shooting birds because they were afraid that we might see it and record it. This went on for a few days, and then representatives from the USDA, which is the parent agency of Wildlife Services, and the Army Corps of Engineers, which is the agency responsible for initiating the cormorant slaughter, met with the Coast Guard to demand an exclusionary zone which masqueraded as a safety zone for their boat. We know that the Army Corps and USDA did this to specifically suppress our First Amendment rights, which is to film the cruelty and show it to the public who is paying for it, because they didn't ask for a safety zone last year, and that their request for the zone was an astounding 1,000 yards, which is more than half a mile. In the end, the Coast Guard approved a 500-yard zone, which is still a vast area that has nothing to do with safety. We know these details because the Coast Guard held a conference call with Shark and representatives from Army Corps and USDA on April 27, 2016. The Coast Guard acknowledged that we and the public had a right to know what Wildlife Services was doing on the river, and they sought a compromise. We offered a number of alternatives, but Dave Williams, Oregon State Director of Wildlife Services, not only flat out refused, but he became audibly angry when we discussed the unprofessional behavior exhibited by his people on the water and whether they had any training at all. Williams confirmed that the shooters were employees of USDA. That means that they are paid for by our tax dollars, and that is disturbing because they spent a number of hours on the water in a second boat trying to decoy us away from the first, and then they sat in their boat doing nothing instead of doing any actual work. These people are federal employees, and they should not be soaking up tax dollars as they take a relaxing boat ride. The exclusionary zone is a 500-yard circle that follows the Wildlife Services boat. One of the tricks Wildlife Services employed was to suddenly pilot their boat toward us in an attempt to cause us to accidentally violate the safety zone. We reported this despicable behavior to the Coast Guard numerous times and warned them that Wildlife Services was going to try to use them to hurt us. Sure enough, on May 2nd, Wildlife Services called the Coast Guard falsely claiming we had violated the safety zone. The result of these false calls by Wildlife Services was that the Coast Guard sent a boat out a number of times to check our position.
Okay, so the reason why we're out here today, we just got a call making sure you guys are outside of the 500-yard limited access area we have on the USDA vessel out here. Okay, according to our radar right now, you guys are good to go. You're just right there, just outside of 500 yards, so I really do appreciate that.
This escalated to the point that on May 3rd, a Coast Guard helicopter circled our boat on 4 different times that day, including following our boat for 4 miles when we left the river. This was an extraordinary waste of government time and money that was directly caused by Wildlife Services and their attempt to entrap us. Shark has filed a federal lawsuit against this serious misuse of government power to suppress citizens from observing the actions of our government. This was one federal agency using another federal agency to entrap citizens who are expressing their First Amendment rights legally and peacefully. None of the animals you are seeing needed to have died. And the only reason why we are able to show you this footage of the slaughter is because Shark had to employ expensive, high-tech equipment that could take video from a great distance. This campaign has cost us tens of thousands of dollars, and the public should not have been put to such difficulties and expense just to document the work of our government. Wildlife Services is not supposed to act like a private killing club that mocks our Constitution by making false claims and suppressing the rights of citizens. This is a federal agency out of control and represents the worst of what bad government can be.